can you be an artist and a prophet? What is propaganda? What is art? Which of you would like to start?
I do believe you can be an artist and a prophet. And as far as the propaganda aspect goes, that's not really your responsibility to decide what is your propaganda and what is not, because there are people who will decide whatever you're doing is propaganda. So you have to be true to yourself in that respect.
I think you can be an artist and a prophet depending on what you paint or what you create. And if you want to be true to your religion, and particularly the Hasidic religion, you cannot do what Asher Lev did. Asher Lev, from the moment he went into the art world, set himself up, knowingly or unknowingly, to be separated from his faith. And it's a very similar story to what happened in real life to Marc Chagall, who started studying art in Russia when he was 12 years old. He was born into a Hasidic family, and by the end of his life, his biggest regret was that he was no longer an observant Jew. He was the world's greatest Jewish artist, and he still felt a Jewish identity, and he still painted Jewish themes throughout the world, but he was no longer an observant Jew. So, depending on your view, you can do both, but maybe not.
So I'm going to ask a question about this play, Rabbi, because in the play, Asher goes to see his Rabbi, and that individual connects him with Joseph Kahn, and that individual tells his father to go on the mission work that he's doing without his son. And I'd love your opinion of what's going on there and why that is in this story.
You have to understand the relationship between the Hasidic Jews, and it wasn't just a rabbi, it was the Rebbe. The Rebbe. He was the foremost leader of the Jewish people, and when he said something, you listened. And the Rebbe allowed Daniel Asher Levy to come and become part of the art world, but he set limits. And he told him, do not paint nudes, do not do these things, because he knew it would take him to the other side. I'm sure that the Rebbe had no idea that he would be painting crucifixions, because as soon as he did, he was asked to leave the community.
I'm going to repeat the question, and it is that as a Jewish person, there are a lot of different ways of integrating with your faith, so that what are the other Jewish, how would they respond to this sort of a play?
So the last Rebbe addressed this problem, and he said, there are no Reform Jews, conservative Jews, and Orthodox Jews. There's just Jews, and they choose to observe at different levels. So we all answer to the same God at the same time, and what you believe is what you believe. I'm not going to tell you what you should believe. And the Hasidim, when they go out throughout the world, Asher asked his father, what do you do when you work for the Rebbe? They don't go out and proselytize. They don't go out and ask people to become Jewish. What they do is to try to connect Jews with their Jewish center, to try to get them to do maybe one more observance, to make them be more and more Jewish. So you have to understand in that context why what Asher Lev was doing was so much offense to his parents, because they could see that he was going to end up on the other side. What he was doing was totally anathema to their life. And it wasn't just the way they lived their life, it was their life. Being Hasidic was their life. Listening to the Rebbe was their life. So if you were less observant than the Hasidim, you'd see nothing wrong with many of the things that happened. But the more observant and the most observant see this as an abhorrence. They would see this as total blasphemy. There's no other way to say it.
Did Daniel identify with any of the main character in his process of becoming an artist?
I identified with it very closely, because I don't feel like I can be a part of the I guess, the Eurocentric art world, because that world is actually almost everything it's been doing for hundreds of years has been to diminish me. And so I have to use what that world has created and take what I can from it to create my artwork, but create my artwork in a way that does not diminish myself. So I could, and what Lev ended up doing was going into that world without, he went into it without, he had a mentor, but he didn't have anyone to help him and guide him through that difficult part of it. And even today, there are a lot of artists who don't have people to guide them through that difficult part of it.
Arsha was a young boy of 12 when he started this journey, and I don't think that he really understood where it was going to take him. And very quickly it became a slippery slope, and he ended up sliding down beyond where he thought he could ever be. And it wasn't clear, because by the end of this play, he hadn't gone to the other end. But I imagine if we followed Arsha through his life, you would find that he was no longer an observant Jew, and that he had separated himself from the traditions with which he grew up.
Asher said that he had no other way other than through the medium of the crucifixion to express his anguish about his conflict, the conflict with art versus what his parents and the tradition that he was in. And what would be another way for somebody like that to find? Which way do we want to go first?
A lot of times we think that we don't have a way because we are bombarded with a dominant expression that tells us the way, and that closes off all other paths, so that we think that there's no other way. But yet we just simply need to find another way sometimes.
Look, in life you have to be true to yourself, and you have to speak to that which speaks to you. And the Rebbe saw this talent within Arsha Lev, and the Rebbe saw his passion, and the Rebbe knew that he was likely going to end up where he shouldn't have, but he encouraged him to be true to himself. So in the end, he expressed himself probably in the only way that he could have. If it hadn't been done at this time, it likely would have been done at a later time. And he may have been true to his inner self, but he felt this conflict about not being true to his heritage, not being true to the beliefs of his father and his grandfather, which were so central in his life. The world has never seen an important, observant Jewish artist. Not one. And I believe that that's because you can only serve one master. And if you're going to be observant to the extent that Hasidim requires, you probably are not going to be able to devote the time it takes to master the arts. And I don't know that you can serve two masters.
How does he make peace with this duality, where he's claiming to be an observant Jew, and yet the Hasidic community does not accept him?
Well, we can't answer that for sure, because we don't know where Asher ended up in this play. At that point, by my accounting, he's early 20s. And he could have been both an observant Jew and a famous artist, and perhaps he went through his life that way. It would have been difficult, but he could have managed it. It's not impossible. We just never have seen that happen.